The snow fell in thick, muffling layers, blanketing the small town in an unnatural silence. Streetlights flickered, struggling against the cold, casting long, jagged shadows across frost-covered windows. Ajay pulled his coat tighter around him, the icy wind biting through his gloves, and glanced at the row of decorated houses. Every Christmas wreath, every blinking light felt wrong. A faint carol drifted through the night, distorted, off-key. It wasn't coming from any house he could see. He paused, straining to listen, the sound stopping as abruptly as it began, leaving nothing but the crunch of snow under his boots. Then came the scream. High-pitched, desperate, and impossibly close, yet echoing as if from all directions at once. Ajay froze, heartbeat hammering, instinct screaming to run, but his feet were rooted to the icy pavement. A shadow moved behind a frosted window across the street, impossibly tall and not quite human. He raised his radio, voice shaking. "Anyone there?" Silence answered. Only the whisper of wind, and the faint, distorted carol returning. From inside the window, the shadow pressed closer to the glass, its outline warped, limbs bending at impossible angles. And then a voice, low, cracked, and almost familiar, slipped through the night. "You shouldn't have come. Not tonight." The snow fell harder, obscuring the figure for just a second, but that second was enough. Something was out there waiting, watching, and Ajay had already stepped into a night from which there was no return. The snowstorm thickened as Ajay and his partner Leena trudged toward the old Miller residence at the edge of town. Their boots sank into the powder, leaving deep, uneven tracks that quickly vanished beneath fresh flakes. Every so often, a gust of wind sent icy needles across their faces, and the world seemed to shrink to the narrow circle of their flashlight beams. The streetlights, flickering like dying stars, struggled to illuminate the skeletal trees lining the road. "Feels wrong," Leena muttered, voice barely audible above the wind. Her words were cautious, hesitant, as if saying them aloud might summon something worse. Ajay didn't answer. He hadn't spoken since the shadow in the window. Rationally, he told himself it was probably a trick of the light, an overactive imagination. But deep in his chest, the unease gnawed, cold and persistent. He'd seen too many cases to trust instinct alone, yet instinct, he realized, often screamed truths words could not. The Miller house loomed ahead. It had been abandoned for nearly a decade, windows boarded haphazardly, paint peeling like curling skin. Christmas lights clung stubbornly to the eaves, long since burnt-out bulbs casting dull, uneven glows. AJ's flashlight swept over the front yard, and he froze. Snow had drifted against the front door, but there, pressed into the icy slope, were footprints. Fresh footprints. Leena gasped. That wasn't there before, right? Ajay shook his head, swallowing the dry lump in his throat. No. Whoever made these, they came recently. The wind seemed to carry whispers, soft and fragmented. He couldn't distinguish words, only syllables that brushed the edges of comprehension. A subtle, almost imperceptible tapping echoed inside the house, like someone, or something, gently rapping against the walls. AJ's fingers itched toward the gun at his hip, but he stopped himself. Guns didn't stop what lived here. They moved to the front porch. The boards creaked underfoot, releasing small clouds of frost into the air. AJ's light fell on the door handle. Cold, silver, unyielding. It didn't move when he pushed. He tried again, harder, the echo of metal against wood reverberating into the silent night. Nothing. Maybe it's locked from the inside? Leena whispered, stepping back. Her breath puffed in white clouds, trembling. AJ's eyes scanned the house. Every boarded window was intact, yet the faintest shadow flickered across one upstairs pane. It wasn't the wind. It didn't belong. A soft, almost childlike giggle echoed from within. Ajay froze, heart hammering. It was wrong, horribly wrong. The house had been empty for years. Children hadn't lived there in decades. "Hello." His voice cracked, barely audible. "Is anyone there?" The giggle ceased abruptly. Silence settled like a shroud. Then a single, hollow whisper. "You shouldn't have come." Leena grabbed his arm. "Did you hear that?" He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. His mind raced. Abandoned house. Locked doors. Strange footprints. Whispers. And yet, rationality clung stubbornly, reminding him. It could be a prank, a local drunk, a branch scraping the boards. But deep down, Ajay knew the difference between human trickery and this. He pulled out his flashlight and moved toward the side of the house. The snow was ankle-deep, making each step an effort, and the wind howled through the empty trees, carrying it all away as if it wanted to erase evidence of their presence. The house seemed to shift around them, subtle and impossible. Boards that had been flush with the walls now bulged slightly, casting new shadows. The air grew heavy, as though they were walking underwater. Lena whispered, "Do you feel that? The air. It's thicker." Ajay nodded, eyes scanning the darkened interior through gaps in the boards. His pulse raced as the faint sound of scraping, like fingernails across wood, echoed from somewhere deep inside. It wasn't constant, only brief, teasing. Each pause drew out the tension, stretching the silence into something unbearable. He tried to force himself to think logically. Cameras, recording equipment, soundproofing. Anything he had ever relied on in past cases. None of it mattered here. Something else had taken root, something older than reason, older than fear. "Ajay, I don't like this. Maybe we should call it in," Lena said, her voice trembling. He looked at her, seeing fear mirrored in her wide eyes, the way her gloved hands clenched and unclenched. He wanted to agree, to retreat, but some instinct, horrifying and irresistible, pushed him forward. They were investigators. They went where others couldn't. They saw what others didn't. And yet tonight, he feared that seeing might destroy them. From inside the house came a new sound. Soft, deliberate, almost conversational. A voice, rasping and distant, yet unmistakably human. "Ajay, come in, it's cold out here." The snow swirled around them, blurring the world into gray and white. The footprints at the door seemed to shift, elongating and twisting in ways they shouldn't. Ajay swallowed. The rational part of him screamed to leave, to run back through the snowstorm and never look back. But he couldn't. Something patient and watching, had called them in. And stepping into the Miller house meant crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. He glanced at Lena. She nodded slightly, too afraid to speak, and together they pressed their hands to the cold, unyielding boards. The whisper returned, closer this time, as if right behind them. "You shouldn't have come. And now you'll stay." Ajay's breath caught. The night seemed to pulse with anticipation, the snow falling around them like ash. And somewhere inside, in the shadows of that forgotten house, something waited, hungry, patient, and inevitable. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed. The cold became sharper, more invasive, as if the house itself were breathing around them. Boards that had sealed the windows groaned under unseen pressure, shifting slightly, releasing gusts of icy wind that carried dust and decay. Ajay's flashlight trembled in his gloved hand, casting a narrow cone of light that barely penetrated the suffocating darkness. Lena's breath came in shallow, visible puffs. It smells like something died here," she whispered. Her voice barely carried over the groaning timbers, yet in that hollow space, it sounded like shouting. Ajay nodded, forcing himself to move forward. "Stay close. Don't touch anything." His voice, steady on the surface, betrayed none of the cold dread curling in his gut. The floorboards creaked under each step, announcing their presence to whatever lingered. Shadows stretched and snapped at the edges of the flashlight's beam. There were no windows, no logical source of movement, but something shifted in the corners of their vision. From somewhere above, a soft tapping began. Not random, deliberate. A rhythmic knock, like fingernails drumming on wood. Ajay froze. "Did you hear that?" Lena swallowed audibly. "Yeah. Upstairs, maybe." "Maybe what?" He pressed, voice low. "Maybe it's nothing," she said, but the tremor in her tone betrayed her. The hallway stretched before them, lined with peeling wallpaper and broken ornaments scattered across the floor. Ajay's flashlight caught a half-broken doll, its painted eyes staring up at them, one cracked lip curling into something like a grin. He recoiled slightly. Something about the doll felt alive. "We should be out of here," Lena murmured. Ajay shook his head, forcing himself onward. "We're not here to leave. We're here to see." A sudden clatter made them both jump. A chair had fallen in the living room. There was no breeze inside, no logical explanation. Lena's hands went to her mouth, muffling a stifled gasp. They moved slowly, methodically, each room revealing more traces of past life, and something more sinister. Family photos, charred and blackened in places, eyes scratched out. A Christmas tree, long dead, ornaments coated in dust, lights flickering sporadically as if on their own. AJ's attention shifted to a small bookcase pressed against the wall. A single volume lay open, pages yellowed and brittle. It was a diary, written in hurried, desperate script. He picked it up carefully, reading aloud. December 24th. He watches. Always. Even when the lights are on. Even when we're together. We can't leave. He doesn't let us. If we try, he waits. Lena stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. Who wrote that? Ajay shook his head. Don't know yet. But it wasn't recent. Still, it feels fresh. Like someone left it for us to find. The diary hinted at something worse. Stories of missing children, strange figures seen only in reflections, ornaments that appeared in rooms they hadn't been placed. Each entry ended with a plea. Don't come back. Sounds like folklore, Lena said, voice tight. Like a story parents tell to keep kids inside on Christmas Eve. Ajay didn't answer. He knew enough to trust the signs, not the rationalizations. Every instinct screamed that this was real and very much alive. Then came the whispers. Faint, almost beneath perception, carried from the corners of the rooms. AJ's flashlight swung instinctively toward the sound. Nothing. Then closer. Voices murmuring in broken, fractured tones. Not yours. Don't look. Leave now. The words faded when they turned fully, leaving only the echo of their own breathing. They continued deeper into the house, drawn down a narrow staircase to the basement. Cold air rushed up, smelling of damp decay. Ajay hesitated at the bottom, his boots sinking slightly into damp, uneven stone. Basement? Lena asked. Do we really? Yes, he said, gripping the flashlight tighter. Everything leads here. The basement was a cavern of shadow, the walls lined with shelves holding jars of unidentifiable contents. Some contained murky liquid, others solid objects, twisted ornaments, bits of charred toys, fragments of clothing. The air felt thick, almost viscous, pressing down on their lungs. Lena's voice trembled. Ajay, it's watching us. Before he could respond, the whispering escalated louder, overlapping voices now. You shouldn't have come. Not tonight, stay. A sudden movement caught AJ's eye. A shadow detached itself from the far wall, elongated and impossible, limbs bending at unnatural angles. It hovered silent, just out of reach of the flashlight's beam. Ajay froze, unable to look away. It's not real, he muttered to himself, but even his voice sounded hollow in the oppressive air. The shadows shifted closer, and he realized with a sinking heart that the snow-covered footprints outside were moving inside, crawling across the floor as if alive. Each step brought the horror nearer, tangible, inevitable. He turned to Lena. We have to keep moving. Maybe it's trying to guide us. Guide us to what? She whispered, voice breaking. Ajay didn't answer. The basement revealed its secret in slow, horrifying detail. On the far wall, scratched into plaster with ragged, desperate marks, were names. Hundreds of them. Every letter shaky, inconsistent, yet unmistakable. Many were crossed out. The last line, freshly etched, read, Ajay. Lena, tonight. Lena stepped back, hand flying to her mouth. This isn't happening. Ajay felt a cold dread settle deep in his chest. It's happening. It's real. And it's always been here. The diary's entries, the whispers, the shadows, they were part of something older than memory. A presence tied to this house, to this night, to Christmas itself. The realization hit him fully. This was a predator patient enough to wait decades, feeding on fear and inevitability. Above them, the stairs groaned. Boards creaked. A distorted carol echoed faintly through the basement, warped and low, like a warning or a lure. Lena clutched his arm. "We should go now," she urged, voice trembling. Ajay shook his head. He couldn't leave, not yet. Investigators never ran. But with every step deeper into the basement, he felt their grip on reality slipping. The air thickened, and the shadows seemed to press closer. From the far corner of the room, a small movement drew their attention. A figure crouched in darkness, impossibly thin, eyes glinting in the faint light. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet with severed strings. The thing tilted its head and whispered in a voice that should not exist. "You were warned, but here you are." Ajay felt the room tilt. Every surface warped subtly, familiar shapes becoming alien. The jars on the shelves rattled, one toppling over to smash into fragments that smelled of charred meat and iron. The shadow behind the crouched figure elongated, crawling along the walls, ceiling, and floor in impossible angles. Lena gasped. "Ajay, it's everywhere." He wanted to argue to pull her back, but the thing was already moving closer, soundless yet undeniable. He could feel its presence pressing against his mind, tugging at thoughts, twisting perception. The diary, the whispers, the strange footprints, they were all threads in a web he could not escape. Ajay whispered, more to himself than to her. We have to face it, see what it wants." "Face it? Are you insane?" Lena screamed, voice cracking. But he didn't reply. Because he already knew. The house had chosen them. The night had chosen them. And the entity lurking in the frozen shadows had been waiting for investigators like them for decades. Those who dared to see, dared to seek the truth, dared to step inside on Christmas Eve. The lights flickered once, then went out entirely, plunging the basement into darkness so complete it pressed on their eyes, ears, and lungs. The whispers escalated, a chorus of warning and laughter and threat. Footsteps, or something heavier, shifted in the darkness. And then, just for a heartbeat, Ajay saw it, a silhouette of a child, or maybe many, faces pale, eyes hollow, frozen smiles etched into skin like a cruel Christmas decoration. They pointed, and the words of the diary echoed in his mind. "You can't leave. You'll stay." Lena screamed, grabbing his arm, but the grip was weak. Something moved between them, a flash of shadow, a distortion of air, and she was gone. "Lena!" Ajay shouted, voice cracking. "No. Don't." The whisper returned, now from all directions. "Stay, it's time." Ajay realized, with a sinking, unbearable clarity, that the house wasn't merely haunted. It was alive. It was hungry. It had been waiting. And tonight, they were part of its story. The darkness pressed in on Ajay like a living thing. The basement, once just shadowed and cold, had transformed into something alive, twisting and pulsing around him. The walls seemed to breathe, stretching and contracting, shifting imperceptibly but unmistakably. Every heartbeat echoed unnaturally loud in his ears, mingling with whispers that seemed to come from the very walls. "Ajay, we can't stay here." Lena's voice came from somewhere behind him, or had it always been inside his head? He turned sharply, flashlight slicing through the thick black, but there was nothing. Only the remnants of the fallen jars, shattered across the floor, some releasing a metallic coppery stench that made him gag. Then he saw movement, shadows dancing across the walls, elongating and bending impossibly. He blinked, and they multiplied, stretching into humanoid forms that twisted with unnatural angles, crawling over the floor and ceiling as if gravity had no hold over them. "No, no, this isn't real," Lena whispered, voice trembling, though she was nowhere near him. A cold wind roared up from the basement floor, carrying with it the faint, distorted carol that had followed them since the street. It was lower now, almost growling, and each note seemed to vibrate through the bones in AJ's body. Then the whispers escalated, overlapping and urgent. "You shouldn't have come. You're ours now, can't leave." Ajay swallowed, forcing his hands to stop shaking. I have to see it," he muttered. "I have to know what it wants." Something shifted in the far corner. a crouched figure emerging from the shadows. AJ's flashlight landed on it, and his stomach dropped. It was tall, unnaturally so, and thin, with elongated limbs bent at impossible angles. Its head tilted sideways, eyes hollow yet glinting with an intelligence that chilled him. The thing's skin seemed pale, almost translucent, veins like black threads beneath the surface. "Ajay." Lena's voice cracked, closer this time, though he still couldn't see her. It's not human." The figure stepped forward, and the air thickened further, pressing on his chest like a physical weight. He stumbled back, heart racing. The shadow followed, yet made no sound. "You can't leave, never," the entity hissed, voice hollow, multi-layered, as if hundreds of whispers came from one mouth. Ajay tried to run, but the basement shifted beneath him. Floorboards warped into waves. Stairs twisted upward like a spiral of wood and shadow. He tripped, nearly falling, and the entity was upon him in an instant, or had it been there all along? He couldn't tell. Lena screamed, a piercing, fragmented sound, and he lunged toward it, heart in his throat. She appeared for a moment, pale and trembling, eyes wide with terror, then vanished again, swallowed by the dark. The jars along the walls rattled violently, some floating briefly before crashing to the floor. Dust, fragments of toys, and glass sprayed through the air. Shadows crawled over the ceiling, walls, and floor, coiling and twisting as if the room itself were alive. Ajay pressed against the nearest wall, flashlight swinging wildly. The entity loomed closer, tilting its head in that unnerving way, whispering again. "It's time. Your turn. You cannot escape." The basement's ceiling seemed to stretch infinitely upward, vanishing into darkness. The floor beneath him rippled, waves of shadow moving like liquid, pulling him in different directions. Every logical thought failed him. Fear clawed through his chest, a living thing. "Lena!" he shouted, voice cracking. "Where are you?" No reply. Only the whispers intensifying, surrounding him completely. "You will stay. Always, never leave." Ajay felt his mind splinter. Memories of past investigations, past horrors, flooded him in fractured flashes. Faces of victims, unknown, forgotten, stared from the shadows, mouths opening in silent screams. He staggered backward, tripping over an unseen obstacle. The entity tilted forward, and he glimpsed the grotesque details. Limbs bending in impossible ways, pale, veined skin stretching unnaturally. It whispered, closer now, directly in his mind. "You belong here. You can't fight. The night chooses." Panic surged, and he lashed out with his flashlight. Light struck the creature, and for a brief second it recoiled. But it was enough to reveal something more terrifying. The basement walls were lined with faces, hundreds of them, pressed against the wood and plaster, eyes hollow and frozen in silent screams. Some faces were human, others twisted and warped. All watched him. It's all of them," Lena whispered, appearing again in a corner, eyes fixed on the walls. They never left. The whispers became a roar, layered voices of the trapped and the predator together. AJ's ears rang, and the flashlight flickered violently. The ceiling above rippled with shadows, forming grotesque shapes, angels, monsters, children, all twisting impossibly as if dancing to a song only they could hear. He tried to reach Lena, to pull her toward the stairs, but each step warped beneath him, the floor stretching and buckling, dragging them apart. She screamed again, a sound that tore through the oppressive air, then vanished entirely. "No, no, please," he shouted, lunging forward blindly. The entity moved impossibly fast now, gliding across the warped floor, limbs stretching, eyes locking onto him. Its whispers were inside his head. "You can't leave. The night chooses. It always chooses." Ajay felt himself falling, tumbling through darkness that wasn't the basement, a void filled with whispers and flickering, distorted lights. He landed hard on a cold, wet surface. He didn't recognize where. Everything was wrong. Time twisted. Every second stretched into eternity, or perhaps a heartbeat. He couldn't tell. "Ajay." Lena's voice, soft and pleading, drifted from somewhere unseen. "It's too late." He tried to respond, but his voice caught in his throat. The air was thick, viscous, each breath a struggle. Shadows pressed against him, crawling into his skin, into his thoughts. Faces of the trapped pressed closer, mouths opening, eyes blank yet accusing. And then he saw them. Children, dozens of them, frozen in eternal terror, eyes wide, mouths shaped in silent screams. They pointed at him. The entity hovered behind them, whispering, "Tonight, you stay." AJ's mind snapped. Panic, fear, realization, all collided. This wasn't a house. This wasn't a night. This was a trap, a predator older than memory, patient enough to wait for investigators like him, curious and daring. It fed on those who sought the truth. He tried to run, but the shadows became walls. The staircase twisted impossibly above him, stairs vanishing into darkness. The air filled with the scent of decay and frozen earth, the whispers escalating to a scream of pure despair. "No. I won't." His words were swallowed instantly. The entity moved closer, coiling around him, limbs stretching into impossible angles. Its face, if it could be called that, tilted toward him, hollow eyes glinting with ancient malice. Then he felt it, a cold, impossibly strong grip on his mind, threading into his thoughts, erasing, reshaping. Every memory, every logical thought twisted into fear, confusion, and despair. He couldn't fight it. He couldn't escape. Every attempt to resist was met with a weight that crushed him from the inside. "Ajay, stay. It's Christmas. You can't leave." The shadows swallowed him completely. Light flickered once more, revealing the basement in brief, terrible clarity. Hundreds of faces pressed into walls, jars shattered, Lena nowhere to be seen, and the entity hovering, patient, eternal. And then silence. Ajay was alone, or maybe not. Something deep inside him knew better. The basement was empty, yet alive. The snowstorm outside howled through the broken boards, carrying with it distant, distorted carols. Time and space seemed meaningless here. "It's here," he whispered, voice trembling. "It's always been here." Somewhere in the darkness, a whisper responded, "You can't leave. And now, you belong." AJ's scream caught in his throat. The shadows pressed tighter. The air was thick, suffocating. The entity loomed, patient, inevitable. And the realization struck him fully. There was no escape, no rescue, no Christmas morning to wake to. He had stepped into a story older than memory. And tonight, he was part of it. The snow had stopped, leaving the town blanketed in an eerie, suffocating silence. Streetlights flickered intermittently, their pale glow struggling through layers of frost and fog. From outside, the Miller house looked abandoned again, as if nothing had happened. No footprints, no broken boards, no evidence that anyone had entered or left. Yet Ajay knew the truth. Nothing here would ever be normal again. He staggered into the street, breathing in the cold, clean air, but it carried no relief. Every inhale felt sharp, intrusive, and heavy with memory. The shadows of the town seemed to lean closer, edges bending unnaturally in his peripheral vision. The whispers had not followed him, yet he could still hear them inside his head, a chorus of longing, accusation, and inevitability. AJ's hand shook, and he realized the flashlight he carried was now useless, its battery dead. He didn't need it. He could feel the darkness as he had felt it in the basement. Thick, alive, patient. Every step he took was measured, deliberate, but the town seemed to stretch around him. Familiar streets became alien corridors. Snow-covered houses became towering, oppressive shapes. The town itself had become an extension of the horror he had just escaped, or thought he had. He found himself at the town square, where the large Christmas tree had been erected. Lights flickered weakly, ornaments dangling from branches that swayed despite the still air. He approached it cautiously, noticing something that made his chest tighten. Footprints circled the tree, too small to be his, too deliberate to be random. Each step seemed to glow faintly under the snow's surface. "Ajay." The voice was soft, hesitant, and familiar. He spun, but the square was empty. Only snowflakes drifted lazily from the darkened sky. His own reflection caught in a nearby shop window, pale and drawn, eyes wide with disbelief and exhaustion. Yet something was off. Another reflection lingered just behind him. A shadowed figure, too tall, limbs bent at impossible angles. He turned sharply. Nothing. He sank onto the curb, hands gripping his knees. Memory assaulted him. Lena's scream, the shadows, the whispers, the walls lined with faces, the entity's impossible presence pressing into his mind. He remembered the diary, the scratched names, the promises that investigators like him never left. And deep inside, an icy certainty settled. Some part of Lena, or whatever remained of her, had not escaped. Time passed, though he couldn't measure it. Minutes, hours, eternity. They blurred together. The town remained frozen, silent. And then he saw it. A movement at the Miller house's upper window. One of the boards shifted slightly, as though pushed from the inside. The shadows pooled there, gathering, stretching downward like slow-moving smoke. AJ's pulse quickened, not with hope, but with recognition. The house wasn't done. It never would be. He tried to speak, to warn someone, anyone. Words failed him. Only a rasped whisper slipped from his lips. "It's still there." From the house, a faint light glimmered briefly, casting a distorted reflection across the snow. He squinted, trying to discern its source. Shapes moved behind the glass. Tall, thin forms bending impossibly, glinting eyes, mouths shaped in silent screams. Faces he did not recognize, yet knew with a horrifying familiarity. He realized that the house had not just been a trap. It had been a collector, and he had been its newest acquisition. Ajay. The voice floated from the direction of the town square. He turned sharply. Lena stood at the edge of the square, or perhaps she didn't. The snow swirled around her, obscuring details, bending her form. She raised her hand toward him, but her movement was unervingly slow, almost like a looped recording. Her eyes were dark hollows. Panic clawed at him. "No," he shouted, but his voice was swallowed instantly by the cold night. He ran, boots crunching in the snow, but the streets distorted. Every step forward became a step sideways, and the town seemed to fold upon itself. He could not find the path back to safety. The world itself had become part of the horror. Breathing hard, Ajay stumbled into an alley. The snow at the far end was deeper, and he realized he was standing on footprints. Small, circling, moving in patterns he couldn't follow logically. They glowed faintly, leaving an unnatural trail through the snow. "You shouldn't have come." The whisper came again, closer this time, filling his skull. He pressed his hands to his ears, but the sound remained, layered and endless. It was all around him, in the air, under the snow, inside his bones. He could feel it pulling at his mind, reshaping memory, bending perception. Ajay sank to the ground, covering his face, trying to block it out. He thought of Lena, of the basement, of the faces pressed into walls, and understood fully. The entity did not merely exist in the house. It existed wherever its victims went. Wherever fear, curiosity, and investigation led. "Ajay, stay." The finality in the voice crushed him. It was not just a warning. It was a statement of fact. He could flee physically, but the entity had already marked him, already claimed him. The memory of the basement, of the shadows, the whispers, and Lena's vanishings were now stitched into his consciousness. They could never be removed. Through the fog and snow, he saw movement. Footsteps approaching, but they weren't his own. Shadows coalesced into shapes too tall and angular to be human. He tried to speak, to fight, to resist, but his mouth was dry. His limbs heavy. Every instinct told him to flee, but the street itself warped to block his path. "You can't leave. Not ever." Ajay dropped to his knees. Snow fell around him, pristine and untouched by any other footprints. The town was still. Every light flickered, some dying completely. The Miller house loomed behind him, silent, patient, eternal. Its windows were like eyes, observing, waiting for the next moment to claim what was left of his sanity. He thought of the investigators before him, those who had faced this same darkness in past Christmases. All had vanished, or returned hollow, broken shells. He realized he would join them, one way or another. The entity was patient. The town was patient. Time had no meaning here. The house would wait, year after year, century after century, for those drawn to it. And tonight, he was part of the story. AJ's hands trembled, frozen in snow. The whispers faded slightly, leaving only the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. The snow around him began to shift subtly, forming new patterns, footprints that were not his own. Each step seemed deliberate, circling, marking territory. He realized that the entity was not just in the house. It was everywhere the night touched, waiting, shaping, feeding on fear. Ajay. The voice was soft, almost intimate now. He looked up. In the distance, faint shadows moved across the street, twisting and elongating unnaturally. Faces appeared for a heartbeat, then disappeared into the dark. Some were familiar. Lena, perhaps others he had never seen but recognized instinctively as victims. All were trapped in the night, bound by fear, curiosity, and the inevitability of the entity. AJ's eyes darted around, but there was nowhere to go. Every path twisted, doubled back, folded into itself. The town itself had become the trap. The snow reflected shapes that shouldn't exist. The shadows coiled and uncoiled, forming figures with limbs bending in impossible angles, faces frozen in silent screams. He sank fully to the ground, the cold biting through gloves and coat. Breath ragged, chest heaving, mind fraying. He whispered into the silent night. "It's here. I can't escape." The wind shifted. Snow swirled, carrying faint, distorted carols, layering with whispers of past victims. The Miller house loomed behind him, window boards shifting, lights flickering weakly. He understood with bone-deep certainty that nothing had changed. The entity was patient. Time was meaningless. Christmas Eve would come again, and the house would wait. Lena, or what remained of her, appeared in his mind, a fleeting echo of a person. Her voice whispered once, fragmented. "Ajay, remember, it never ends." He shivered, knowing she was gone, or perhaps already part of the entity's tapestry of trapped souls. All he could do was sink into the snow, eyes wide, mind fraying, aware of the entity everywhere, inescapable, eternal. And the last thought that pierced through his mind, sharper than snow-laden wind or whispered horrors, was the truth he could not deny. He would never leave. The town remained silent, the snow untouched. Yet something had changed forever. A new presence was marked, a new soul woven into the night. Christmas would come again, and so would the entity. Waiting, watching, patient as ever. The night closed around him, heavy, unyielding, eternal.